We just got our archaic formats digitized this past spring. Most of us probably remember VHS tapes. How many of you have ever used a U-matic tape? Let's get this thing open.
Oh, wow.
This was the standard
look at that thing.
70s into the probably, I'm guessing, late 80s-ish.
That is amazing. Yeah.
And I didn't know what was on these because I knew what was on some of them, but I didn't know if they'd survived or not because we have no playback equipment. And we sent it to a vendor, and all of the stuff was in really great shape. We have our commencement program from 1974. Had a speaker named Stuart Udall, who was the Secretary of the Interior under Kennedy and Johnson. And he spoke, it was May of 74, gas crisis was just happening. So he's talking about the gas crisis. And Watergate was happening before Nixon resigned. So he's talking about the gas crisis and what it meant for America and how gas prices were out of control and how the environment was being degraded and fossil fuels were going to have to go away. And it's amazingly relevant from something that was 48 years ago. And it was a speech of his that was recorded in our newspaper. It was transcribed, but we didn't have the actual video. We got the video now, it's on YouTube. So this was a really great project. Didn't cost a whole lot, so we got all of this stuff scanned.
Perfect.
In-process materials.
Ooh, here we go.
That's a dust cover. Some of our really early Worcester State materials here, a lot of these are admissions books. This is essentially students who were applying, who their parents were, their address. Remember we talked about penmanship at Becker College? So anyone who did administrative work had to learn how to write. And this is the reason why, because all the ledger books looked like this, including for businesses. And so we've got these going back to about 1880.
That's amazing. Delicate.
Yeah,
Amazing.
I mean, it's delicate and yet it's not. I mean, you look at what happened to my jacket. This is called red rod. It's just dried out leather. But the binding is still really tight and the paper is in really good shape. So that's actually in really robust condition. It's just that the outside is the shell is a little bit fragile. We have a lot of alumni books. We have grade books, meeting minutes from faculty meetings, scrapbooks that the Alumni Association collected over the years. They used to teach teachers a lot about horticulture and identifying plants. And so we have leaf books.
I heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah, we have leaf books. These were
very
leaves plucked from the trees of Worcester about 1890s. And what's interesting about it is that it includes a lot of trees, particularly the American chestnut and the elm trees, which are gone now because of blights. So that's a record of what was before the blights spread around.
Roasting on an open fire, right? Like it was such a part of American culture, and now it's not a thing.
Yeah, it really is. What was cool about teaching back in those days is they really did well-rounded education. The teachers who graduated here, they had to learn how to do basic art. Their pageantry was a big part of it. They had to learn how to sing, because you had to teach, especially in a grade school, you might be teaching history and art, okay? So you had to do a little bit of everything. And I just feel like things have gotten very specialized in education. And I think back to these kids 100 years ago who were doing all kinds of cool stuff in class every day. And they were nature walks, and they're collecting leaves, and they're drawing, and they're singing, and they're doing pageants, and they're spending a lot of time in recess. And it was just there was a dynamic sort of a dynamic kind of learning back then that I think we've stepped away from.
Stuff is not that important.
Student newspapers. This is the repository of all kinds of interesting information that happened on campus. Tons of Becker newspapers as well. Now this one you can see has been vandalized because people have cut pieces of it out. I have the originals elsewhere, but it's pretty cool. I mean, again, it records events that we just don't have access to anywhere else. That was going to be, I think that was an event.
You know what's interesting about the yearbooks? When Nancy was working on them years ago, I read a couple, and one of the things the students wished for back then was finding purpose in life and meaning. That was said quite often in the books, as opposed to newer yearbooks, because they were more so well-rounded in their education back then.
They might have asked deeper questions, I would say. I mean, if you read diary entries or journal entries from students in this era, there was a kind of depth to it, I think. That's not to say that people today aren't deep, but I think that it could have been the time of history too. You know, we have a lot of student biographies here that
Right.
students wrote right for World War II.
Right. Right.
And they had friends who had gone off and died in wars.
Right.
And you know, so there was a depth to it, I think, that I don't see as much in writing today. But maybe I'm not looking at the right kind of writing.
So, yeah.
It's not a Halloween ghost. It is a women's gym uniform from around 1950, which to me looks like a
Wow.
waitress uniform.
It does look
Yeah.
exactly.
Or a hospital worker. But I'm not being rude. But there are bloomers underneath too. So you had like underwear.
Like you need to be active or do like a little twirl. You don't.
Well,
want
yeah.
to-
You don't want it
Right.
flying up.
Yeah.
We have
Seems
pictures
like
of
good design.
pictures of women wearing these, playing tennis or playing volleyball. My mother, who went to a teachers' college in the late '50s, talked about her gym uniform. Hers was like a plasticky. It's horrible. I hate it. This wall of plaques, you know, a room gets dedicated and then the building gets renovated and they forget the room is dedicated to somebody and the plaque ends up being sort of cast aside, or buildings are demolished and the rooms don't exist anymore. And so I collect a lot of the plaques here. I just keep them on the wall. You can see I'm running out of room. I'm gonna have to extend it slightly.
We'll put it in the backlog.
Well, yeah, I mean, I may end up moving this painting over a little ways, but you know, various dedications over the years, and some of these people I don't know who they are, but there's a memorial, Robert William Fox Memorial Award, presented by the Alumni Association, and I don't know if the award still exists anymore. They gave it a number of years, and the rest of them are blank. But I think it's important to keep these things intact somewhere on campus.
Yeah.
Right. I agree.
This is a painting of Old Main, our Old Main building, which there's a photograph of. I think it's kind of cool, actually. It's 1983. It hung in a student center a few years ago, but I thought it was kind of cool. So they asked me if I wanted it. And I said,
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So that's the archives, and I would say that what you see up here reflects what you would see in almost any archives facility anywhere in the country. It's smaller scale or larger scale. A really tiny archives might be half the size. The National Archives, you'd have a huge reading room, you'd have a huge administrative area, you'd have a huge collections area, but the basic functions are going to be the same. From my aunt.
Well, after
Now-
this, now we do.
After this, you know what I do now, right? You can't say that anymore. So. And my 2 master's degrees on full view. Wow. So, so that's it, and I'm very
Amazing.
lucky. I have a lot of autonomy in what I do. I don't have a lot of support, but I can get support from graduate students or interns or student workers. And the Becker collection is a great part of this, because as you saw, it's not just the history of Becker College, it's the history of where Becker graduates worked, history of businesses in Worcester, history of higher education, history of business schools, all of that stuff is represented. So it's a really nice collection to have. And one of my goals is to get one more high density unit where all that junk in the back is, and shut that back there. So I'll have space for some of these large cartons. And Becker might end up with its own shelving unit.
Oh, that'd be cool.
That would be
That'd be very nice, yeah.
So that's the grand tour.
Cool. Thank you so much,
You're
Ross.
very welcome.
Now we know what you do,
Now you know what I
and
do.
we think we understand.
we think,
Exactly.
right,
It's not that complicated.
right. Well,
Oh, good.
and we appreciate your efforts and organization
Yeah, yeah.
and everything you've collected and everything you've done, and it sounds like you have plenty more to do as well, which is
Oh yeah.
amazing.
Always have more to do.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much, Ross.
Welcome.